The 23rd of July. Ian Jones watched his colleague wield the sledgehammer, fearful that one misplaced blow would bring the huge edifice at Chadley Hall crashing to the ground. "You're sure that's not a supporting wall, Marty?" "Course I'm bloody sure." Marty Shawcross raised the hammer, while Ian scratched his shaven head. At least they'd have plenty of time to get out if the ceiling started to collapse. A few foundation-shaking thuds later, when the dense cloud of plaster dust had begun to settle, Marty and Ian looked at the small, jagged hole that they'd made in the wall. "You were right. Looks like a doorway. It's been blocked off. What did I tell you?" Marty reached out and pushed the loose plaster from the edge of the hole. "Do we carry on, or what?" "Oh, it's not the reason why. Oh, it's just to do what's on the plans. Give it another bash." Marty obeyed, and dust and debris flew into the air as the hole expanded. The men coughed, and Ian took a grubby handkerchief from his pocket and held it to his face. "We're meant to be knocking through to the next room. But this looks like some sort of cupboard, or... I'm having a look." "Go on, then. Rather you than me." Marty watched as Ian poked his head through the hole and quickly pulled it out again. "Can't see a bloody thing. Got your lighter?" Marty, an incorrigible smoker, pulled a cheap disposable cigarette lighter from his trouser pocket and handed it to Ian, who lit it and held it just inside the gaping hole. After a few seconds of silence, Ian turned to face his companion. The blood had drained from his face, leaving it as white as the plastered dust that was settling on the splintery floorboards. "What is it? What did you say?" It was a while before Ian felt up to answering. Neil Watson had dived down to the wreck of the Celestina several times. But, being a creature of habit, he preferred to work on dry land, dealing with the artefacts the divers were bringing up from the seabed. Viewing their video footage and writing reports in the disused beach cafe that they were using as their site headquarters. He was unused to working in such splendid isolation. He missed the hustle and bustle of a land-based dig, and the chatter of his colleagues, most of whom were working aboard the boat or diving beneath the sea. But today he had company, a couple of bored-looking youths, Oliver Kilburn and his friend Jason Wilde, aged 18, and both at a loose end since the finish of their final school exams, had volunteered to help with the finds from the wreck. And as Oliver's father was Dominic Kilburn, the businessman who owned the beach, Neil felt he could hardly complain that the pair were unreliable and turned up only when it suited them. Satisfied that the boys weren't doing too much damage to the delicate objects brought up from the seabed, Neil stepped outside the cafe onto the sandy concrete steps that led down to the beach. He shaded his eyes against the sun and squinted at the dive boat, which bobbed near the rocks, watching the figures on the deck, divers in shiny black with brightly coloured air tanks on their backs. Neil knew that their main enemy was the weather. The ship's timbers had been uncovered by a freak storm 3 weeks before and discovered by amateur divers who had reported their find to the relevant authorities. And if nature decided not to cooperate, another storm could cover the remains of the Celestina up again just as quickly. They were working against the clock, and Neil Watson preferred to work at his own pace. "How's it going then, Dr. Watson?" Neil swung round. A tall man was standing on top of a rock to his left, outlined against the sun. Neil shielded his eyes, feeling small and subservient as he gazed up at the towering figure. But perhaps this was Dominic Kilburn's intention. "We're making good progress. They've uncovered more of the timbers and found a lot of interesting stuff. Your son's in there washing the pottery they brought up this morning. High-status stuff. Probably from the captain's cabin. Want to take a look?" Neil pointed at the shabby wooden building near